Usually when you walk down a typical suburban street, there is this expectation of like absolute uniformity. It feels almost like a controlled laboratory experiment,
Okay,
right?
absolutely, yeah.
You look at two houses sitting side by side. They have the exact same architectural style. They're rooted in the same neighborhood. They feed into the exact same school district. I mean, even the weather beating down on the roof is identical.
Right. On paper, those properties are completely interchangeable assets. Same square footage, same year built, same property tax bracket.
Exactly. But then you look at the yards. One house has a huge sold banner slapped triumphantly across the sign after like a single weekend. There are moving trucks in the driveway. It's a complete flurry of energy.
Right.
But the other house, the supposed twin, is a completely different story. The sign is just gathering dust. The flyer box is totally empty. It sits there for weeks, maybe bleeding into months. And you just cannot help but wonder what the actual difference is.
Yeah, it is the ultimate real estate mystery. We're conditioned to assume there must be some sort of hidden physical flaw.
Like a cracked foundation or something.
Exactly. We imagine a cracked foundation or black mold in the walls or terrible plumbing, something entirely invisible to the naked eye that just chased all the buyers away.
Right.
But often, the physical structures really are perfectly comparable. The real difference isn't hidden in the drywall. It's hidden in the strategy.
And today we are going to expose that invisible strategy. We are pulling from a really fascinating breakdown titled The Three Pillars of Swift Real Estate Sales.
That's a great read.
It really is. The goal of this deep dive is to bypass all the anecdotal neighborhood gossip and surface level noise and get down to the actual root mechanics of a transaction.
Yeah, looking at the exact physics of what moves a home from merely sitting on the market to a closed deal.
Because the source material reveals that buying or selling a home might feel deeply emotional to you, but the mechanics dictating the sale are just brutally rational.
They really are. The mechanics are entirely predictable once you understand them. And the text completely strips away all that emotion to show how mastering a few core concepts fundamentally changes how the market reacts to a property.
So let's start with the biggest hurdle, and honestly, the one that makes people the most uncomfortable, the price.
Oh yeah, the big one.
The source text is blunt. It states, priced right, a home sells, period. But then it immediately outlines the most common trap sellers fall into. It says, priced high to leave room to negotiate. It sits.
Yeah, and the factual outcome of that trap is stunning. The text points out that homes left sitting almost always close for significantly less money than the ones that were priced correctly on day one.
Wait, really? They actually close for less?
Almost always.
Mhm.
It's a phenomenal paradox. The very strategy a seller uses to maximize their profit is the exact mechanism that destroys their leverage.
That is wild.
Right. When a property hits the market with a day one price that aligns with the market's current reality, it represents fair, undeniable value. That generates immediate friction and interest.
Okay, I see.
But when a price is inflated, specifically to manufacture a buffer for negotiation, it breaches that threshold of fair value and triggers just a cascade of negative consequences.
It makes me think about walking into a job interview for a role that, the entire industry knows pays around $100,000 a year. You know the salary band. The hiring manager knows the salary band.
Right.
But you walk in and decide to ask for $200,000. Your logic is that you're creating a massive cushion, hoping they will counteroffer and maybe you'll land at $130,000.
Which never happens.
Exactly. The hiring manager doesn't counteroffer. They don't negotiate at all. They just look at you like you are completely disconnected from reality, and they throw your resume in the trash. You disqualified yourself before the negotiation even started.
That's a perfect analogy. You signal to the employer or the buyer that you are operating in a totally different reality. But the mechanism behind why this happens in real estate goes far beyond just human perception.
What do you mean?
Well, we have to look at how modern real estate algorithms actually function. Buyers today aren't just driving around looking at signs, right? They're relying on digital platforms.
Like setting up strict search parameters on apps.
Exactly. If the comparable homes in your neighborhood are selling for around $500,000 and a buyer sets their search filter to a maximum of $510,000, pricing your home at $525,000 just to build in a cushion means you physically do not exist to your most likely buyer.
Oh, wow. So the algorithm just hides you completely.
You are literally invisible to the people who actually want your house. And the people who do see it, The ones searching in that higher bracket are going to compare your house to actual homes worth that much.
Which makes your house look completely inferior by comparison.
Right. That is the technological trap. But there's also a deeply psychological trap, which explains why the homes that sit end up closing for less. When a home is lingering on the market, it accumulates what is known as time debt.
Time debt.
Yeah. Time on the market acts like compounding interest against the perceived value of the home.
Okay, I get the logic of the algorithm, but honestly, this feels incredibly irresponsible to tell a seller. I mean, human nature tells us to start high.
Sure.
If I'm putting my biggest financial asset on the line, my instinct screams at me to build in a safety net. It feels reckless to just give away my negotiating buffer. Why does the market punish that specific instinct so severely?
It comes down to the novelty factor. When a house first goes live, it has incredible momentum. Buyers who have been losing out on offers for months suddenly get a push notification. It's fresh blood.
Right, everyone rushes to see it.
Exactly. If the price reflects reality, they rush the door. But if they see that inflated price, they don't bother making a lowball offer because they assume the seller is just unreasonable. They move on.
So the novelty just wears off.
Fast. 2 weeks pass. A month passes. Now the listing is stale. The psychology of the buyer pool completely shifts. The buyers looking at it a month later are asking a very dangerous question.
Which does?
What is wrong with it?
Oh, man. So even if the foundation is solid and the roof is brand new, the simple fact that nobody else wanted it becomes the defect.
Precisely. The time spent on the market is perceived as a fatal flaw. So by the time the seller finally capitulates and drops the price to where it should have been on day one, the dynamic is completely ruined.
The seller is fatigued.
Yeah, and the buyer senses that desperation. The buyer now holds all the leverage, so they come in with an aggressive, deeply discounted offer. The seller just wants it over with, so they accept.
And they walk away with less money than if they had just offered an attractive, realistic price on day one.
Which would have sparked urgency and multiple offers.
Wow. Which means the negotiation cushion isn't a cushion at all. It's an anchor that sinks the entire listing.
That's exactly right.
But, okay, let's say a seller actually listens. They swallow their pride, ditch the cushion, and price the home perfectly on day one. They beat the algorithm, they avoid the time debt. But the house still isn't getting offers.
What?
This reveals the next major point of failure outlined in the text. The price might be mathematically perfect, but the visual data the buyer is receiving contradicts that math.
Right, now we're moving from the spreadsheet to the screen, the presentation of the asset.
The source material places a massive emphasis on how photos and video carry almost all the weight in a buyer's initial assessment. And it cites a staggering statistic from a real estate data firm called 1000 Watt.
Oh, this stat is crazy.
It really is. It says nearly half of home sellers are underwhelmed by how their agent marketed their home. Think about that.
It's wild.
Almost 50% of people paying someone to sell their most valuable asset look at the marketing and feel disappointed.
It highlights a massive failure rate in basic visual communication. And the implications of that failure are just devastating to the final sale price.
It makes me think of like a culinary analogy. Imagine you have a literal Michelin star meal. The ingredients are perfect, the chef is world-class, the intrinsic value of the food is completely undeniable.
Okay, I'm with you.
But instead of plating it beautifully in a fine dining room, it gets scooped onto a flimsy, soggy paper plate and handed to you under fluorescent lights.
Oh, that's terrible.
Right. The intrinsic value of the meal is still there, mathematically, but the presentation completely ruins the buyer's appetite. The visual cues make you assume the food is cheap.
Exactly. That visual disconnect is fatal. In today's market, the digital listing is the first showing.
Right.
Long before a buyer ever turns the key in the front door, they have walked through the home 50 times on their phone. If the lighting is dark, if the angles are cramped, if the video tour makes the viewer dizzy, that paper plate presentation is completely undermining the intrinsic value of the home.
But I keep getting stuck on the wording of that 1000 watt statistic.
How so?
Well, if the photos and videos are primarily designed to attract the buyers, why does the source focus so heavily on the sellers being underwhelmed?
That's a really good question.
Like, isn't presentation really just about satisfying a seller's ego? Or is it a warning sign that the agent isn't treating the listing with the necessary visual gravity?
It's definitely the latter. It's a common misconception that it's about ego, but the seller's reaction is actually the ultimate litmus test for the marketing's effectiveness.
Why is that?
Because the seller is the one person on earth who knows the true intrinsic value of the home. They know how the hardwood floors look when they are freshly polished. They know exactly how the morning light floods into the kitchen.
Oh, I see.
So when they look at the agent's marketing materials and feel underwhelmed, what they're experiencing is a failure of translation.
Mm.
They are realizing the agent failed to capture the actual value of the asset.
They're seeing the Michelin star meal on the paper plate.
Exactly. If the seller, the person intimately familiar with the home's best features, is uninspired by the photos, how on earth will a skeptical, hypercritical buyer be inspired?
They won't be.
Right. And this loops right back into the pricing trap we just discussed. Poor presentation artificially inflates the perceived price in the buyer's mind.
How does it inflate the perceived price?
Well, you might have priced the home at $500,000, which is mathematically correct. But if the photos look cheap and gloomy, the buyer's brain anchors the value at $450,000. Suddenly, your perfectly priced home feels overpriced.
Oh, wow. So you fix the price, you hire a cinematic crew to capture the presentation perfectly, the math and the visuals are completely aligned. But the text introduces a third variable that changes everything.
The invisible market.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have to look at who is actually seeing this flawless presentation. The source argues something that feels incredibly counterintuitive. It claims that simply getting a property listed on the public market isn't the actual job of an agent.
Yeah. This completely upends the traditional understanding of how real estate works.
Right. It says the real skill is knowing exactly who the buyer is and having a dedicated strategy to put the home in front of them before the listing even goes public.
Most sellers assume the job is pure syndication. You throw the listing onto the big websites, plan to sign in the yard, and wait for the phone to ring.
It makes me think a concert promoter. A totally average, uninspired promoter thinks their entire job is just stapling a generic flyer to a telephone pole in the center of town.
Right.
They consider that listing it publicly. They cross their fingers and hope someone happens to walk by, reads the flyer, and decides to buy a ticket.
Which is a terrible strategy.
Exactly. A great promoter doesn't rely on the telephone pole. They host an exclusive VIP presale. They know exactly which fans want to be in the front row, and they reach out to them directly with a private link before the general public even knows the tour is happening.
And that VIP presale creates an entirely different psychological environment for the transaction.
My gut reaction, though, is that a VIP presale inherently limits the pool of potential buyers. If the ultimate goal of selling a house is maximum exposure to drive up the price, what is the strategic advantage of getting it in front of a buyer before it's public?
It feels like a paradox.
Yeah. Doesn't hiding it limit the pool of potential buyers?
It seems like a mathematical certainty that more eyeballs equal a higher price, but that ignores the psychology of exclusivity and momentum.
Okay, unpack that for me.
This pre-public strategy, this invisible market, isn't about keeping the property a secret forever. It's about curating extreme urgency. When an agent identifies a highly qualified buyer who has been searching for exactly this type of property and gives them early, exclusive access, the buyer's mindset radically shifts.
Because they aren't just doom scrolling through hundreds of listings on an app.
Exactly. They feel privileged.
They feel like they're being handed a golden ticket to skip the line.
Because they know the property is inevitably going to hit the public market in a few days, there is a massive, built-in ticking clock. They know they have a tiny window to secure the asset before the telephone pole flyers go out and the feeding frenzy begins.
Oh, that is so smart.
This targeted placement creates a competitive bidding war entirely within a single buyer's mind. They aren't competing against other offers, yet they are competing against the terrifying threat of the impending public market.
Wow. So you are basically weaponizing the threat of a bidding war without actually having to endure the chaos of the public market.
Exactly. The buyer is willing to pay a premium just for the convenience and certainty of avoiding the open market bloodbath.
That makes so much sense.
And if that invisible pre-public work doesn't result in a closed deal, the seller hasn't lost anything. They simply execute the public launch as planned with zero time debt accumulated.
Okay, so we have the framework. Price it right on day one to beat the algorithm and avoid time debt. Present it with absolute visual clarity so the buyer's brain anchors to the highest possible value.
Right.
And place it strategically before the public even knows it exists to weaponize exclusivity. But how do we actually measure if this strategy is working in the real world?
The metrics.
Yeah, because the source text gives us a very explicit warning about the metrics we use, and it paints a fascinating picture of the current economic environment.
The source fundamentally demands that we redefine how we measure success and failure in a real estate transaction. It specifically warns against looking at the average days on market.
Right. It basically says that metric is completely useless for predicting how long your own home will sit. If you execute the three pillars properly, your home will move.
It will.
And then it describes the immediate reality of today's market with this incredible phrase. It says the market right now is soft enough to negotiate and fast enough to punish slow decisions.
Soft enough to negotiate, fast enough to punish slow decisions. It perfectly captures the duality of the current landscape.
It feels like a total paradox. How can a market be soft and fast at the exact same time?
How would you visualize it?
Well, it reminds me of playing a weird game of musical chairs. Like the music is playing at this very relaxing half-speed tempo.
Okay, I like that.
So buyers have some breathing room. They are strolling around the chairs, maybe asking for an inspection, casually negotiating the terms. That is the soft part of the market.
Right.
But the exact second the music stops, the chair is violently yanked away instantly. If you hesitate for even a fraction of a second, you are entirely out of the game. That is the fast enough to punish part.
The visual of the warped musical chairs is highly accurate. A soft market means the frenzied, sight unseen, waive all contingencies bidding wars of the past few years have largely tooled off.
Which is a relief.
Yeah, buyers finally have the leverage to behave like rational consumers again. They can negotiate. But the fast element means that high-quality inventory, the singular homes that perfectly execute the right price, flawless presentation, and strategic placement disappear instantly.
I still struggle with dismissing the days on market metric entirely, though. Every news article quotes the average days on market.
They do.
Every real estate report leads with it. It's basically the gold standard for understanding housing velocity. If we shouldn't look to that to tell us how long a home will sit, what does that metric actually measure? Just the failure of people who ignored the three pillars.
It is measuring an aggregate illusion. And this is a massive trap for consumers trying to interpret data. Average days on market lumps together two completely different realities.
So?
It takes the beautifully presented, perfectly priced home that's sold in 48 hours and averages it with the overpriced, poorly photographed home that rotted on the market for 180 days.
Oh, I see. It's like having one foot in a bucket of boiling water and the other foot in a bucket of freezing ice water and concluding that, on average, you're perfectly comfortable.
That is the exact mathematical fallacy occurring. Your individual home is not an aggregate. It is a singular asset.
Right.
If you look at an average days on market report of, say, 45 days, and use that number to justify overpricing your home because you falsely believe you have a month and a half to test the waters, you are fundamentally misreading reality.
You're stepping in the ice water on purpose.
Exactly. The paradox of a market that is simultaneously soft and fast means the middle ground has evaporated. You are either the impeccably prepared home that moves instantly, or you are the overpriced home being brutally punished by the fast market because you made a slow, arrogant decision.
So mastering the pricing, the presentation, and the placement isn't just a best practice guide for a quick sale. It is literally your only shield against being financially punished by a market that no longer tolerates hesitation.
Hesitation, whether it is holding out for an unrealistic price or settling for mediocre marketing, is the single greatest liability a seller has right now.
Let's pull all of these threads together. We started by looking at two identical houses on the same street, trying to figure out why one moves and one sits. And the source text gave us the blueprint to the invisible mechanics behind the yard signs. First, you have to beat the algorithm and the time debt by pricing right on day one. The negotiation cushion is a trap that guarantees a lower closing price.
Exactly.
Second, presentation is everything. Your visual marketing cannot fall into the 50% that underwhelms the seller because poor photos physically lower the perceived value in the buyer's brain.
Yep, the paper plate meal.
Right. And third, placement requires a pre-public strategy. You use exclusivity to create a bidding war in a single buyer's mind before the public ever sees the listing. If you do those three things, the average days on market is a totally meaningless number to you. You don't have to fear the music stopping because you're the one controlling the tempo.
The entire text is a masterclass in market psychology. And looking back at the mechanics we just unpacked, the source leaves us with a truly fascinating implication to consider. It systematically proved that artificially inflating a price to create a negotiation buffer almost always results in closing for less money than a realistic day one price would have generated.
Right, which is why.
So in an economic environment that is fast enough to punish slow decisions, it forces us to reconsider everything we know about leverage. It makes you wonder, is absolute transparency and radical realism actually the most aggressive and profitable negotiation tactic you can employ?
Radical realism as the ultimate offensive maneuver. I absolutely love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. And to you listening, we'll catch you on the next one.